Okay, so we're back, and we've got the guitar. We're going to start assembling it. We're going to try to get this thing strung up. By the end of the day, we're uploading videos fast and furious all day in little bite-sized chunks. So if you're stuck at home in lousy weather, you got something to do while you're eating your soup. All right, so I wanted to show you a picture. I showed this earlier. It's a picture of the guitar as it was on the night of March 31st, 1984. And this was the Madison Square Garden show. This is the show that I attended. It was my first Van Halen show, actually. But the purpose of me showing you this picture is the pickup. Pickup at this point does not have the white tape protecting the bobbin and the winds on the lower side. There apparently was a problem with him getting the high E string stuck underneath the bobbins, and it was breaking some of the winds. So a repair was made. This may be part of the pickup conspiracy as to maybe it was wound hotter. I don't know. Or not hotter, I shouldn't say that. Wound with more resistance, more winds. But anyway, it doesn't have the white tape, the point being. So we don't have to do that. So I'm going to put the computer down. We're going to go ahead and start putting this guitar together. So first, I think, let's put the trem system back in. All right, so all that's there. Let's grab our post screws. Once more, putting a little bit of wax on them. There we go. And backing them up counterclockwise till we feel them drop. There we go. We're in the thread. Same thing, reversing them. Drops, we're in the thread. Looks right to me. Sometimes the low E sided one has more wear on it because that's where your palm would be. So I was actually just looking to see if one was obviously more worn than the other. And they look about the same. To me, this one looks a little bit more worn, so I think it's in the right place in terms of like aesthetics. So we're just going to put these in. There we go. Leaving a little bit of the barrel up. Now this we're going to have to loosen up a little bit. There's no question about that. His bar was pretty much sloppy. By that I meant if you just whacked on it, this bar would spin like crazy. And I think that's, important in a lot of ways. Being a loose kind of deal, it allows you to kind of move the bar quickly and whack it up against the base plate, and you get some velocity on the thing before it actually hits, and it leads to a different kind of feel in terms of there we go, a different feel in terms of how the trem is reacting to you. It really makes for a very quick kind of dive bomb feel. Okay, we're almost there. We need a little bit more. There we go. Like that. Okay. Yeah, that's what we want. So now we've got a free spinning bar. Woohoo! So that's good. Get that back in. We're going to get our springs in next. Okay. Make sure we're still seated. We are. We're using, again, the V pattern, which is the inside to the outside. So the two sort of inside ones going to the two outside on them, like so. Good to go there. Next, I think we're going to put in the humbucker. Now, I wouldn't recommend actually bolting this humbucker down quite yet in terms of screwing it into the wood. There's a little bit of play. Actually, I think we can do it. On a Frankenstein guitar, I'd wait until you've got the strings on it, and that way you can center the pickup on the strings, but we're not really moving this anywhere anyway. It's snug in there. So we're going to use the scribe give ourselves a starting hole from which to apply our screws. And what I'm using are actually truss rod cover screws for a Gibson, you know, like the on a Les Paul, the top adjust truss rod. So we just kind of go like this. We'll lift it up, place the screw into the hole, and we'll go back down in there, and we'll get it lined up. Go ahead and screw this down. There we go. That one's in. Get the next one going. Okay. Now the way I like to do this is with a pair of needle nose to just grip it. This could be a pain in the ass, being that these screws are magnetic. And you're going to find that they get stuck to the bottom of the pickup more so than they're going to go where you want them. So there we go. That's in. So I just kind of grab it with the needle nose and just ram it into the sort of pilot mark I made with the scribe, and we're good to go. So we got our pickup in, our trem on. Next we're going to use our volume control, and for that I've got a Bournes. Now there is another kind of Bournes. There's several different kinds, obviously, lines of Bournes potentiometers, and it's up to you sort of which ones you want to use. Now the Eddie models, the Eddie Van Halen model ones, are very free spinning, and I've got some of those, and you can literally like spin it, and it's so free moving that it'll whack against the stop and actually come back a little bit too. That's how loose they are inside of the element. And that really is nothing more than what's called a hydraulic grease, which is used in the ones that have a friction, a hydraulic feel to them, sort of a smooth but resistive feeling. They'll actually, if you peel this cover off, you'll see that there's a goo that's placed on the back of this cover, which is a thick grease, which the element spins in, and it gives it that drag and feel to it, which is what this particular pot has. Now I've used the ones that are frictionless, but you know what I find for me is that when I'm playing the guitar, the way I like to play, it seems like my pinky is like here. That's where I like to rest my pinky, and when I move it, I keep turning the volume down. So I end up shutting the guitar down and lower and lower and lower until it turns off, and that's not what you want. So for me, I'd prefer just to use a friction kind of pot, and I can take the cover off and adjust it just right. And if it gets to be a problem, I can always go back to the other one. So I've got a couple of lock washers on there, just doubled up to help with the spacing. I'm going to kind of insert it in our hole. That looks good there. Only got about 3 threads showing. So that'll be nice. I'm going to put on our little ring and our nut here. I'm going to grab a nut driver. We're going to send it home. Send it home from school early. It was very bad. All right, got that. Then we can put on the knob, and the knob is an all parts knob. And it's actually, you know, these are Mustang knobs, which are about the same thing exactly as an MXR knob. Jazz bass knob, whatever you want to call it. So he probably took his off of God knows what. Who knows? So that'll work. So there's our little volume control. It's got some resistance to it, so if I whack it with my finger, it's not really moving. So that's good. So I won't have a problem with that. For me. Someone else, they probably don't, they're not as clumsy as I am and can kind of keep their hands where they should be. I'm kind of all over the place. So let me turn on our soldering iron here. Let's see, we're going to need to, it's kind of a shame, but we're going to cut the lead off this neck pickup here. in a second, just to make things nice and neat. So on the pot we have, 3 tabs here. You have your input, your output, and your ground. So the first thing I like to do is I'll install the ground wire right here, and you can do sort of a 2-for-1. So I'll strip off, let's say about 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, like so, and I will first solder it to the tab, the ground tab. Let me see if I can get this set up good so you can see what I'm doing. Use this bar to kind of prop it up. Okay. And where's our, there we go. Keep your soldering iron clean and it'll always be happy. So, yeah, that looks good. So we're going to first solder right here. And a tip for guys that don't solder a lot, it is really kind of like something that you need experience doing, and that's sort of why we created the solderless cables to plug it again. It's because soldering really does take some skill to create a good solder joint. And the tip I could give you right now, I guess, would be that what you want to do is you want to first heat the part and then apply the solder as the part is heated to the part, not to the tip of the soldering iron so much. And that ensures that you don't have a cold joint, right? Because the part then is hot enough to accept the solder as it is literally melting the solder. All right, so we're going to then kind of push that exposed wire back against the body of the pot, the back cover, and we're going to place our soldering iron on that and transfer our heat. Then we're going to go ahead and just move our solder in, and you'll see when it gets hot enough, it will start to flow right around, there we go, right on the edge of the pot, and then it'll spread out. So there we have a good joint. So if you're not really doing this all the time, you'll lose the feel for it. So that's why we kind of invented the solderless stuff. All right, so the next one that we're going to do is the output cable, which goes into the center lug. So I'm going to try to move this again out of the way. Where's my screwdriver? I'm going to tuck that ground wire down a little bit better. Get it out of the way. Okay, and this is braided wire, which I like because then that allows me to just solder right to the pot. So again, I'm going to start with the center, the core, soldering the core to the center lug. There we go. And then I'm going to bend this back, right? I'm going to move this wire out of the way. Bend this back, place it up against the wall, and then we're going to solder directly the braid to the pot. Okay. And then we're going to hold it in place with a screwdriver. I wouldn't recommend using your finger. There we go. And then we do the input of the volume potentiometer, which is the first lug. And I'm just going to do it the same way again. I'm going to cut this lead off about where I want it. And I'll save this for another project. You never know when you're going to need 5 inches of wire, braided wire, shielded braided wire. I'm going to push back the braid. Okay. And that's really how you do this stuff. You don't strip cloth wire, you push it back. That's the whole point of the cloth wire. Now, here's another little goofy story. I don't have any evidence for this, but I'm nearly certain this has got to be the reason. Leo Fender, right? Fender amplifiers. Back in the 60s, when Leo actually had control of the place and it wasn't the CBS bean counting guys, they used cloth wire. And why did they do that? It's my opinion, after having owned an amplifier company and having had amplifiers built by, let's say, less than skilled labor, that people cannot strip wire correctly without a lot of experience or proper tools. And by proper, I mean custom-made tools. The problem with wire stripping is that, well, I can show you, the chances of each one of these particular, let's say, pre-gauged little areas from which to strip the wire matching the diameter perfectly are not great. And then the chances of the technician or the employee using the right one every single time in the hundreds of operations of stripping that are required to build an amplifier are even lower. And what happens is you end up, let's say, nicking the core wire, sometimes cutting a few extra braids off the wire, work hardening it, and then that's, in my experience, having seen it many, 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 many times, that's when an amplifier is going to fail. It's going to lead to a failure. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The fact that you've weakened the wire, in some cases you've actually partially cut through the wire, will only lead to failure. So I felt that Leo Fender was the type that he was pragmatic, and that if there was a solution that involved the least amount of work, the least amount of problems, and we had the highest probability of success, that's what he was going to use. And cloth wire, the way that you work cloth wire, I've got a piece, like a little piece right here. I mean, I've seen people take cloth wire, right, and grab a pair of wire strippers and try to strip cloth wire, right? That's not what you do. You cut it cleanly off and then you push it back, right? And now there's no chance of you having nicked the wire at the point at which it's exposed from the jacket. It can't happen because you didn't touch that. So this wire remains pristine and is less prone to failure. And I think that's why, Fender used that wire, and why a lot of like homemade, let's say, equipment fails, or equipment that was made by less experienced workers fails quite often, and why we really thought solderless cables was the way to go for, building your own custom length cables. But anyway, I digress. We're going back to soldering again this braided cable down on the pod again. Right? Starting to flow out. Take our screwdriver, hold it in place. Another tip, don't blow on your solder joints. That's not a good idea either. You want them to cool at the rate at which they're going to cool at ambient temperature. Anytime you're kind of cooling metal, you're reforming it, you're recrystallizing it. If it goes too fast or too slow, I shouldn't say there's such a thing as too fast or too slow, because it really depends upon what you're looking for it to happen. If you're looking to make, let's say, like steel really brittle, there's a speed at which you can cool it, which will make it very brittle. There's a speed at which you can cool it, which will make it more flexible. Solder is no different. Cold solder joints, they never really flow out. They've basically hardened too quickly. So when you blow on it, it may not, but I don't see a reason. Wait the extra second and a half. Why not? Okay, so we have the electronics portion of the guitar set up. Let's give it a quick test to make sure that we're still seeing that, what was it, just under 8K. So we're going to use a little input jack, use the cable there, grab our multimeter, and we're going to test at the leads to see what we come up with. So turn the meter back on. I don't know if you can see that or not, but 8K. Okay, so it's gone up a little bit, and that's due to the temperature in here. Temperature will affect the impedance of the coil as the metal expands and contracts. There we go. Okay, so I think we're good. This is now working good, so we won't have any issues when we string the thing up and wonder, hey, why is it not working? What did we do wrong? Find out now while you still got the guitar apart. That way you won't have to take it apart again. All right, so now the next thing to do, and really about the last thing to do, is put the neck on. And I've got obviously the cool Kramer B-Series plate to put on there with the rubber gasket. Now I think Ed's 5150 had 6 bolts on it, but I'm not sure. So I've never really taken that guitar apart. never held it, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our neck. Now I think we're gonna first see what the string action is gonna be like close to like without a shim. So to do that, I'm gonna take, put the neck in, grab my ruler again, and I'm going to place it here. And as we can see, the ruler is bottoming out before it makes it to the saddle. And when it makes it on the saddle, it looks like the gap at the 22nd fret is unacceptable. So we obviously are going to need to shim it just like all the Kramers were shimmed. So in an earlier video we were talking about what the shim material was. I don't have any of that, but it looked to me to be like fiberglass, bodywork fiberglass. So we're going to use cardboard. So I got some cardboard. Just going to cut myself an appropriate size piece. Now this is kind of a sin in a lot of circles, that we should have milled the neck pocket at an angle, which for a Floyd Rose I believe is 2 degrees, but then we wouldn't be accurate to what the guitar was. So I'm using 2 pieces of cardboard, right, put together. Just from experience, that's what it should work out to be, and I can measure it with the calipers for you guys. About 30 thousandths, right? Which is about, what, $3 bills? Y'all. Can't say dollar bills anymore without saying y'all at the end, right? So now we're going to press the neck back in again. See it at home? What do you do with the ruler? Here it is. Now we're going to once again, and as you can see, we're perfect. To my eye, that is exactly with the Floyd flush down on the body. That is a good amount of relief. All right, so we're in the park right there. Or damn close. I mean, granted, more than likely, I'll be taking this neck on and off a couple of times to get everything dialed in perfectly. So at this point, we're going to wax up our neck screws, which is really a good idea. It really makes everything work a lot easier. Oh, good thing we remembered this. Something I always do. I don't like to have tension on my necks when they're sitting around. So I usually take out the truss rod adjust. So I've got that in a box. I'm going to go grab it. Okay, got the, this is what I was talking about. This is the adjustment nut. And I usually just take it out of the guitar, out of the neck. Well, for painting reasons, a lot of times when I paint a guitar, I use a stick that I'll actually put in the hole here to hold the neck for painting. But also, I don't like to have any tension on the truss rod at all when have got the neck off a guitar without strings on it and such. Reason being is that, you know, the truss rod is there to balance the tension between the strings and the neck to keep it straight. And if one of the two are missing, like let's say there's no tension on the truss rod at all and you've got strings on it, it's going to force the neck into a bow. And over time, that bow, the wood is going to remember that. And it's not going to like you. It's going to remember it like your wife remembers you forgot your anniversary. It's not going to be good. Conversely, if it's tight and there's no string tension on it, it's going to back bow. And when I say this, the back bowing is way worse, because to correct that sometimes, you know, is near impossible. It requires heating the wood, placing it in irons, forcing a bend back into it, letting it cool, maybe doing that 2 or 3 times. If there's front bow on it, you can always tighten the truss rod down more, and it'll kind of respond again and go back into place. So the danger is back bow, and back bow will happen when there's no string tension and the truss rod is tight. So if you've got guitars lying around that don't have strings on them, loosen the truss rod before you regret that. So now I'm just going to check to see that there's some relief in here. This neck is almost dead straight. So we're going to leave it like that for now. So again, we're going to place the neck back into the, that would have been funny, into the pocket. If we didn't remember that that was there, I'd be like, why is the guitar rattling? Why am I getting this rattling sound? Gee, I don't know. Could be the truss rod. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and let me take these screws out of here. Doing this in a retarded fashion. Put something like that. It's like some funky Star Wars music. I think Darth Vader's coming in. I don't know who wrote this, but it's scaring me. Alright, now I'm going to use the drill here, but it's only to get it down to a point. After which, we're going to use our screwdriver. You do not want to go the whole way with a power tool for obvious reasons of destroying your guitar. Let me see. I'll move that up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, I think that's good. So I'm going to stop with about, quarter inch left, eighth inch left to go. So as I'm not going to risk snapping a screw off or stripping the threads or, doing some damage. All right, so we move the camera back down on the angle so we can see. I'm just going to drive it home with the hand tool. And I like to do the back ones first, get those tight. Make sure that the angle, that it's flush, and it is. Tighten these down. There we go. All right, so the neck's on. So there we have the guitar. I'm curious as to what the whole thing weighs. So I got my scale. Now let's get the scale off the phone. That might give us a weird reading. Okay. Zeroed in. And let's see what we end up with. 7 pounds, 11.4 ounces, under 8 pounds, perfect. So this is a really good weight for a Strat style guitar, I think. The basswood sometimes comes in stupid light, and I don't like that so much. I think it reduces sustain somewhat, being that it's easier to vibrate. An infinite mass would be the ideal, but that doesn't exist. So here we have it. I think we're ready to put strings on it next. So I think we're going to leave it here. I'm going to upload this, and then we'll keep going.